Okay, this is going to be a first. Several days ago, I got an email from the church suggesting that I do an ABC class study online. I have to admit, I resisted. I have never before preached to a camera. And we'll see how this goes. As I was working in my office trying to get rid of a bunch of stuff during this time of shut in, I came across this notebook which I was about to throw out, and I glanced inside. It's a notebook from October 18th, 1987, in the city of Isiro, then called Zaire, now called Congo. We had been gone for a long time from the field, and we were just back, and the regional director asked me to become the pastor of the missionaries. We had several people there who were laymen working on a building school project. And then there were also missionaries from another mission in town. And I became the pastor of the Sunday evening service. And this is notes from one of those Sunday evening services back in 1987. As some of you know, Philippians is my favorite book. And this particular devotional comes from Philippians 4, beginning with the 4th verse through the 8th. Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. There's an old saying that I have long liked to say humorously, cheer up, things could be worse. I tried it, and sure enough, they got worse. Well, some of us kind of feel that way with being required to remain in our houses for who knows how many weeks to come. But Paul is talking about attitudes, values, prejudices, those things that make up a large part of our lives. The general statement before going into specifics, he says, rejoice in the Lord always. And emphasize that by saying, and again I say, rejoice. Paul really has the key here. Rejoice in the Lord. He didn't say rejoice in the circumstances. Does it mean you have to be happy for COVID-19? But we can rejoice in the Lord nonetheless. Rejoicing in the Lord cancels the circumstances. Are there always going to... This was back in 1987. I have no idea when I wrote these notes what the circumstances might have been. I think things were going pretty well for them at that point. They were building new schools for the national church. And had no idea I would be talking about it again in 2020. And our circumstances, they're real. But more important, are we rejoicing in the Lord and realizing that the circumstances will pass, but the Lord is always faithful. If you go back to good old Job, the first chapter, the 21st verse, the Lord gave and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job wept, tore his coat, shaved his head, fell on the ground. Didn't he also heap ashes on his head? And then he said, blessed be the name of the Lord. All those circumstances, and he said, blessed be the name of the Lord. Can you say that today? The circumstances hit him hard, but he brought them back into perspective with the Lord as his focal point. Now, as we move on to verse 5, let your moderation be known unto all men. The Sturgeon version of that verse says, get a hold of yourself, brother or sister. You see, rejoicing in the Lord is not a Sunday morning event where we sing a few comfortable old songs and visit with one another. Rejoicing in the Lord is a state of mind. If we're in the ABC class at New Life Community Church, or if we're in our homes, we rejoice in the Lord because he is good. Verse 6, be careful for nothing. Oh, now that's not talking about washing your hands and staying 6 feet apart. What that really means is don't worry for anything. Stop worrying. Don't be a worrywart. Remember, if you're rejoicing in the Lord, the circumstances don't count. Actually, they're his circumstances. He cares for you. I remember when I was in my first church and I had some kind of problem going on, and I was talking to my mother who happened to be there, and I referred to the verse that says that he cares for us. Well, that's a comforting thought, and he does care for us. And Mom said, you need to read that he cares for you. He does the caring for you. Oh, you mean I don't have to carry the load alone? He carries it for me. But what about all these problems? If you can remain calm in this situation, You either don't understand it, or maybe you're crazy. No. Martha, 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 Jesus said, you are careful. There again, the word should be anxious. And troubled about many things. We don't want to be Marthas. We want to be Marys and worship at the Lord's feet and rejoice in Him. In verse 7, oh, but the one who rejoices in the Lord will find the peace of God which passes all understanding. How can this be? Because we're rejoicing in the Lord, and what a difference that makes. But how do I do it? That sounds easy for you to say sitting in your easy chair, Daryl. We have to discipline our mind, and he tells us how to do that in verse 8. Think on these things. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest or honorable, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. You know, sometimes we evangelical conservatives, we like to emphasize the negative. We read something on an email or hear it on television, and boy, that really comes down the row on our political opinion, and we've got to spread that around about how this situation is far worse than anybody believed. Paul says, think on things of good report. Don't be a peddler of all the bad stuff. How about save your energy for the good stuff and share that and rejoice in the Lord? Think on these things. Going back to verse 4, and again I say, rejoice in the Lord.